No one remembers the sirens first. They remember the silence that followed. The ER doors burst open like a breaking dam, and a man built like a wall charged through nearly 7 feet tall, close to 300 pounds, eyes wild, fists clenched, pain and rage stitched into every step. People screamed. A security guard froze. Someone dropped a clipboard that clattered too loudly on the tile. And then the impossible happened. The smallest person in the room, the quiet new girl no one had bothered to learn the name of, moved once. Not fast, not flashy, just precise. In less than a heartbeat, the giant hit the floor as if gravity had been waiting for permission. No gunshots, no bloodbath, just a room full of professionals standing perfectly still, trying to understand what they'd just seen. Who was she? How did she do that? And why did a single phone call seconds later make the charge nurse whisper, "Lock the helipad. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world." And if stories about hidden strength, justice under pressure, and quiet heroes speak to you, subscribe and stay with us. The night shift at Mercy Harbor Medical Center always carried a particular weight. Between midnight and dawn, the emergency department felt less like a workplace and more like a pressure chamber. Every sound sharper, every mistake louder. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting a pale sheen across scuffed linoleum floors, gurneys lined like waiting soldiers, and tired faces that had already lived a full day before clocking in. Ava Carter stood near the trauma bays, hands loosely folded in front of her, posture straight without looking rigid. She wore standard Navy scrubs, a name badge clipped neatly at her chest. Nothing about her appearance demanded attention. 5'4" at most, lean, brown hair pulled into a practical bun. No jewelry, no visible tattoos. The kind of person people's eyes slid past without registering. New girl's awfully quiet, someone muttered near the nurse's station. Ava heard it. She always did. She simply didn't react. Charge. Nurse Renee Wallace glanced up from the board, eyes sharp beneath tired lids. Renee had been running ER floors for nearly 20 years. Her authority earned the hard way through double shifts, mass casualty nights, and the kind of judgment calls that never made it into policy manuals. She'd noticed Ava on her first shift, how she watched instead of rushing, how she asked fewer questions than expected, but never the wrong ones. Still, Renee hadn't decided what to make of her. Carter Renee called. "You're on intake overflow tonight. Stay close to Bay 3. "Yes, ma'am," Ava replied, voice calm, unassuming. "Across the department, doctor." Nolan Pierce snapped off his gloves and tossed them into a bin with unnecessary force. He was an excellent attending physician, fast, confident, decisive, but he carried himself like someone accustomed to being right. People listened when he spoke, partly because they trusted him, partly because arguing took too much energy. "Security's short tonight," Pierce said, glancing at the clock. "If we get another psych hold or drunk brawl, it's going to be a mess." Frank Dorsey, head of hospital security, grinned from near the entrance. Thick neck, broad shoulders, former high school linebacker energy that never quite faded. "Relax, Doc. I've handled worse with less." Ava's eyes flicked briefly toward Frank, then away. At the far end of the ER, intern Miles Keene struggled with an IV line, his hands shaking just enough to betray his nerves. He was bright, earnest, and painfully aware of how little room there was for error. Ava stepped in smoothly, adjusted the angle, and nodded once. The line slid in clean. "Thanks," Miles whispered. She offered a small, reassuring smile. "You had it. Just needed a different angle." It wasn't the first time she'd done that, stepping in, quietly fixing problems before they announced themselves. It was also why, despite the whispers, no one could point to a single mistake she'd made. The automatic doors sighed open and closed as ambulances came and went. Chest pains, a broken wrist, a toddler with a fever that wouldn't come down. The steady rhythm of controlled chaos settled in. Then Ava's phone vibrated. Not loudly, just once. She didn't reach for it immediately. She waited until she'd finished charting, until no one was looking directly at her. When she finally glanced down, the screen showed no name, just a string of numbers she hadn't seen in over a year. 3 characters followed. Red. Below it, a set of coordinates. Her breathing didn't change. Her pulse barely did. But something deep behind her eyes sharpened like a blade being drawn slowly from its sheath. She deleted the message. Across the ER, Renee was laughing dryly at something Pierce said. Frank leaned against the wall, arms crossed, relaxed. The monitors beeped. A woman cried softly in Bay 2. Life continued. Ava slipped her phone back into her pocket and took a measured step closer to the entrance. She checked the distance from the doors to the nurses' station, the placement of the gurneys, the position of the security desk. Her gaze tracked reflections in the glass, noting who stood where, who was distracted, who wasn't. No one noticed. 10 minutes later, the air changed. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a subtle tightening like the moment before a storm breaks. The sliding doors at the front of the ER shuddered as something hit them hard. Frank straightened. What the hell? The doors burst open. The man who came through them barely fit the frame. He had to duck slightly, shoulders scraping the sides as if the building itself had underestimated him. Nearly 7 feet tall. Close to 300 pounds easy. His clothes were torn and soaked in something dark that might have been blood or oil. His chest heaved like a bellows, each breath dragged from deep inside. His eyes were wide, unfocused, darting across the room, as if searching for threats only he could see. "Move," he roared, voice cracking with strain. "Get out of my way." The sound cut through the ER like a thrown chair. A woman screamed. A child started crying. Gurneys rattled as people scrambled back. Miles froze his mind, struggling to catch up to what his eyes were seeing. Frank stepped forward instinctively, hand going to his radio. Sir, you need to stop right there." The man didn't slow. If anything, he accelerated, boots pounding the floor, knocking a rolling stool aside like it weighed nothing. "Code Grey," someone shouted. "Doctor," Pierce swore under his breath. "Security, do something," Ava moved. "Not forward. Not yet." She shifted her weight, planting her feet. Her eyes tracked the man's shoulders the way his left arm hung half an inch lower than his right, the tremor in his hands, the shallow, panicked breaths that suggested exhaustion layered over adrenaline. Fight or flight, heavy on the fight. The man's gaze snapped toward the nurse's station. "Where is he?" he bellowed. "He said he'd be here, sir. You're in a hospital," Renee shouted, trying to project authority over fear. "Put your hands down." The man grabbed an IV pole from beside a gurney and ripped it free with a metallic screech, swinging it up like a spear. The motion was clumsy, fueled more by desperation than control, but one wrong move and someone would be dead. Frank lunged too slow. Time stretched. Ava stepped into the gap between the man and the crowd. Someone shouted no. The giant's eyes flicked to her confusion, flashing across his face at the sight of someone so small, blocking his path. For half a second he hesitated. That half second was enough. Ava raised her hands, palms open, voice low but carrying. "Hey, I see you. You're safe right now." The words weren't for comfort. They were for focus. The man snarled, lifting the IV pole, and Ava moved. What happened next unfolded too fast for most eyes to follow, yet slow enough for Ava Carter to count the beats of her own breath. The man, later they would learn his name was Duke Ram, lunged forward, the IV pole whistling through the air with the ugly promise of bone-breaking force. Ava didn't retreat. She didn't shout. She stepped in at an angle just off the line of attack, her left hand snapping up to redirect the pole while her right hand drove forward, not hard, not dramatic, but precise. A sharp strike to a nerve cluster beneath the collarbone, a pivot of the hips, a controlled sweep of the leg. Duke's momentum betrayed him. The IV pole clattered to the floor, his massive frame pitched forward, then sideways, then down, hard enough to rattle the tiles, but controlled enough that his head didn't crack against the ground. Ava followed him down knee, pinning his shoulder forearm, pressing against a point just below his jaw. She leaned in, her voice low, steady, unmistakably calm. "Breathe. Don't fight it." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the ER erupted. "What the hell was that?" Frank shouted, rushing forward too late to stop anything. "Doctor." Pierce stared, mouth slightly open, the scene, refusing to fit into any mental category he had. Nurses froze mid-step. Patients gawked from their beds. Somewhere a monitor alarmed, its shrill beeping suddenly obscene in the stillness that followed. Ava kept her pressure steady, eyes locked on Duke's face. His eyes were still wild, but the fight was draining fast, his muscles betraying him as the adrenaline burned out. She shifted her weight subtly, maintaining control without cutting off his airway. "Sedation," she said, not loudly, but with a tone that assumed obedience. Low dose. He's exhausted. Renee snapped out of her shock first. Miles, get me lorazepam now. Miles scrambled, nearly tripping over his own feet. Frank hovered radio, half raised, his confidence leaking away. We should cuff him. Call PD. Not yet, Ava said. Frank bristled. You don't give orders to security. Ava finally looked up at him. Her eyes were calm, assessing, unafraid. I just stopped him without breaking a single bone, she said evenly. If you rush this, someone gets hurt. Frank opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He couldn't articulate why, but something in her tone made him hesitate. Renee knelt beside Ava, checking Duke's pulse. Fast, erratic, but strong. She's right, Renee said. We do this clean. The sedative went in. Duke's breathing slowed, his body finally sagging into unconsciousness. Only then did Ava release him. She stood smoothly, as if she hadn't just dropped a man nearly twice her size in front of half the hospital. She stepped back, hands already reaching for gloves, transitioning seamlessly from controlled violence to clinical care. Let's get him to Bay 3, she said. Trauma evaluation, full labs. He's been running on fumes. Dr. Pierce found his voice at last. He stopped, recalibrated. You okay? Ava nodded once. Yes, doctor. Renee watched her closely as they moved Duke onto a gurney. That wasn't self-defense training, she said quietly. Ava met her gaze without flinching. It was enough. As they wheeled Duke down the hall, whispers followed in their wake. Did you see that? She barely touched him. How did she know where to hit? Miles walked beside Ava, eyes wide. That was incredible. Ava didn't respond. Her attention was on Duke's hands. They were huge, scarred knuckles thickened from years of impact. But beneath the grime and dried blood she saw older marks, faded bruises, circular scars near the wrists half hidden beneath swelling, the kind left by restraints, not hospital restraints. Her jaw tightened. In Bay 3, the team went to work. Monitors attached, IV lines placed, clothes cut away. As the fabric fell aside, something slipped from Duke's jacket and hit the floor with a dull plastic thud. A small black object. Miles bent to pick it up. Don't, Ava said sharply. Too late. Miles froze object halfway to the counter. It was a USB drive, industrial-grade reinforced casing, the kind not sold at electronics stores. A thin strip of faded tape wrapped around it bore a handwritten marking. Echo 7. Dr. Pierce frowned. What is that? Before Ava could answer, Duke stirred. No, he rasped, eyes fluttering open. Don't touch that. Ava stepped closer. Easy, she said. You're safe. Duke laughed weakly. Safe. His gaze flicked around the room, panic flaring anew. You don't know where I am. I know you're in an ER, Ava replied. And no one here is hurting you. They will, Duke whispered, if they haven't already. Renee exchanged a look with Pierce. Sir, who are they? Duke swallowed, throat working. His eyes locked onto Ava's face, searching it like a map. You, he said hoarsely. You're not like them. Ava didn't deny it. They took my sister, Duke said. Said if I didn't bring it back, they'd make sure I never saw her again. The words hit the room like a dropped tray. Pierce straightened. You're saying someone coerced you into what? Running into a hospital swinging an IV pole. They told me he'd be here, Duke said, panic creeping back into his voice. A man who hides behind white coats, who moves medicine like money. Ava's eyes flicked just briefly toward the hallway beyond the bay. Administrator Clay Hargrove stood there, hands folded behind his back, watching with polite concern etched onto his face. Well, Clay said smoothly as he stepped inside, this is quite a disturbance. Renee bristled. We have a patient in crisis. Of course, Clay replied, and we'll make sure he gets the help he needs. But I'm afraid I'll need a full incident report, especially regarding the physical altercation. His gaze slid to Ava. Ava met it evenly. I'll also need to place Nurse Carter on administrative leave pending review, Clay continued, tone regretful. For everyone's protection. Duke's eyes widened. No, he croaked. If she goes, Clay raised a hand gently. Sir, please remain calm. Ava felt it then, the subtle shift, the tightening of the air, the sense of being watched not by one man but by something larger, quieter. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Once, she didn't look at it. Outside Bay 3, the overhead lights flickered just for a second. No one noticed, except Ava. The flicker in the overhead lights lasted less than a second, but Ava felt it ripple through her chest like a warning bell. Power fluctuations in an ER weren't uncommon old infrastructure, heavy load, but timing mattered. Timing always mattered. Administrator Clay Hargrove smiled as if nothing unusual had happened. He had the kind of smile that lived comfortably in boardrooms and donor galas, practiced and reassuring, designed to smooth rough edges without ever touching the truth beneath them. "Everyone take a breath," Clay said gently. "We'll sort this out by the book." Renee crossed her arms. By the book doesn't mean sidelining a nurse who just prevented a mass casualty event. Clay inclined his head, acknowledging the point without conceding it. "And we appreciate her initiative. Truly. But physical force against a patient who was about to impale someone," Renee cut in. Dr. Pierce cleared his throat torn. "We do need to document this properly." Ava remained silent. She stood at the foot of Duke's bed, eyes on the monitors, watching his vitals stabilize. Heart rate down, oxygen saturation improving. The sedative had taken hold, smoothing the jagged edges of panic into uneasy sleep. Duke's hand twitched. Ava caught it gently, grounding him without waking him. Her thumb brushed over his knuckles, feeling the calluses, the old fractures that never healed quite right. He wasn't a criminal. He was a man who'd been cornered. Clay's gaze followed the motion, something cold flickering behind his eyes before the polite mask slid back into place. "Nurse Carter," he said, voice calm. "I'll need your badge." Ava finally looked up. The room felt suddenly smaller. "With respect," Ava said evenly, "my patient is not stable enough to be left unattended." Clay smiled wider. "We have plenty of capable staff." Her eyes didn't leave his. None who understand him. That landed harder than she'd intended. Dr. Pierce shifted uncomfortably. "Clay, maybe we can." Clay raised a hand. "Doctor, this is an administrative matter." The word administrative fell like a gavel. Renee opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew this dance. She'd seen good nurses buried under paperwork and liability reviews before. The system had ways of protecting itself. Ava exhaled slowly. 5 minutes, she said, to finish my chart and handoff. Clay hesitated, then nodded. 5. As he turned away, Ava's phone vibrated again. This time she looked. Unknown. Contact 1 minute. Her jaw tightened. Ava leaned closer to Duke, lowering her voice so only Renee and Miles could hear. "He's telling the truth," she said. "Someone pushed him here." Renee's eyes narrowed. "You sure?" Ava nodded. "And whoever it is has access." Cameras were down when he came in. Miles swallowed. "I thought that was a system glitch." "Glitches don't send coordinates," Ava said. Renee stiffened. "Coordinates." Ava didn't answer. She straightened, turning toward the nurse's station where Clay was already speaking quietly into his phone, his back angled away from the room. Frank Dorsey hovered near the entrance, looking unsettled. "PD's on their way," he said to no one in particular. "Figured we'd need backup." "Did you call them?" Ava asked. Frank nodded. "Protocol." Ava's eyes flicked to the clock. 40 seconds. She moved quickly now, but not obviously so. She stepped to the workstation, fingers flying over the keyboard as she finalized Duke's chart, clean, thorough, unimpeachable. She logged her actions with precise language, every intervention justified, every second accounted for. Then, she did something no one noticed. She sent the USB drive into the system, not opening it, not accessing the files, but triggering a checksum scan. Just enough to leave a digital fingerprint. If someone tried to erase it later, it would scream. Her phone vibrated again. Now. The lights flickered longer this time. A murmur rippled through the ER. "Did we just lose power?" someone asked. "No," Miles said, checking the monitor. Backup generators didn't kick in. Ava's pulse ticked up a notch. Clay turned back toward them, his smile gone now, replaced by irritation. "All right," he said briskly. "Nurse Carter, we're done here." Ava unclipped her badge and held it out. Clay reached for it and stopped. The sliding doors at the far end of the ER hissed open. 2 police officers stepped inside, hands resting near their belts. But they didn't look at Duke. They didn't look at Ava. They looked at Clay. "Mr. Hargrove," one of them asked. "We need to speak with you." Clay blinked, surprise flashing genuine for the first time. "Is there a problem, officers?" Routine inquiry, the second officer said. "Won't take long." Clay's eyes darted just briefly toward Ava. She met his gaze unreadable. "Of course," Clay said smoothly. "I'm happy to cooperate." As he walked away with the officers, Ava felt the tension in the room ease by a fraction, but not enough, because the phone in her pocket vibrated one last time. 30 seconds. Helipad. Her breath caught. Renee leaned in. "What aren't you telling us?" Ava looked at her, then really looked at her, at the lines etched by years of responsibility, at the woman who'd kept this place running when everything else failed. "Someone is about to try to erase this," Ava said quietly, "and they won't care who gets hurt." Renee straightened. "What do you need?" Ava's answer was immediate. "Access to the roof, and for you to trust me." Renee hesitated for exactly one heartbeat. Then she grabbed her radio. "Security, clear the stairwell to the helipad." "Now." Frank's voice crackled back. "What? Why? Just do it," Renee snapped. Ava moved, already heading for the stairwell, her steps purposeful but unhurried. Miles followed, pale but determined. "Should I be doing this?" he whispered. Ava glanced back at him. "If you don't want to, don't," Miles swallowed. "I want to." They reached the stairwell as the building shuddered faintly, not from power failure but from something heavier, something landing. The deep rhythmic thump of rotor blades pressed down through concrete and steel. Ava paused at the door hand, resting on the cold metal. Whatever was coming next would change everything. She pushed it open. The stairwell vibrated as if the building itself had grown a pulse. With every step Ava took upward, the thudding of rotor blades pressed harder into her chest, a low-frequency force that rattled bones more than ears. Miles followed close behind, breath, shallow sneakers squeaking faintly against concrete. Somewhere below them, the ER continued to function. Monitors beeping, voices rising and falling, oblivious to the fact that something far larger than a patient crisis had just landed on the roof. They burst through the final door into a wash of wind and noise. The helipad lights burned white against the night, cutting through mist and exhaust. A dark helicopter squatted at the center of the pad, rotors still spinning, the air around it violent and alive. No hospital logo marked its side. No news insignia. Just matte paint and purpose. 2 figures waited near the aircraft, jackets snapping in the wind. Ava didn't slow. Miles did. "Oh my God," he breathed. One of the figures turned as Ava approached. Even through the roar, she recognized the posture, instantly balanced, alert, not wasting motion. The man raised a hand, signaling the pilot. The rotors began to slow. "Ava Carter," he said once the noise dropped enough to be heard. His voice carried authority without volume. "You're late." Ava stopped 3 feet from him. "You weren't supposed to land here." The man's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Plans change. Behind him, the second figure, a woman with her hair pulled tight and eyes that missed nothing, studied Ava with open curiosity. "She looks different," she said. "People usually do," the man replied. Then to Ava, "Colonel Marcus Vale." Ava nodded. "Colonel." Miles stared back and forth between them, his brain clearly failing to assemble a coherent picture. Hi. The woman held up a hand gently. "You're in the wrong place, sweetheart." Ava glanced at Miles. "Go back downstairs. Tell Renee to initiate a quiet lockdown, no overhead announcements." Miles hesitated. "Ava, please," Ava said. That did it. Miles nodded and retreated, the door slamming shut behind him. Colonel Vale waited until they were alone. "You triggered the checksum." Ava exhaled. "I had to. That file was meant to stay dark until extraction." If it stayed dark, Ava said it would have disappeared. The woman stepped forward now. "Agent Tessa Lang," she said. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." Ava's eyes flicked to her badge, then back to her face. "Didn't expect the Bureau." Lang shrugged. "Didn't expect a hospital administrator to launder opioids through trauma supply chains either. Guess we're all learning tonight." Ava's jaw tightened. "Clay Hargrove." Vale nodded. "We have him on our radar." "Had him. He slipped the net twice already. He's trying to bury this," Ava said. "And he's not alone." Lang's gaze sharpened. "How many?" "At least 3 inside the hospital," Ava replied. "One with access to cameras, one with access to power, one who fed Duke bad information to force a scene." Vale's expression hardened. "You're sure about the man, Duke Ram? He's a pawn," Ava said. "Desperate. Coerced. He was told someone he trusted would be in the ER tonight." Lang tilted her head. And was he Ava? Didn't answer immediately. Yes, she said finally. Me. The wind tugged at her words, threatening to scatter them into the night. Vale studied her for a long moment. You weren't supposed to be anywhere near this. I wasn't, Ava replied. Until you sent Red. Vale didn't deny it. You were the only one with the skill set and the cover, and the least protection, Ava said. That was your condition, Lang interjected lightly. Disappearance. New name. New job. No one looking too closely. Ava laughed, once humorless. They looked close enough. Below them a siren wailed, brief, cut short. Ava's head snapped up. That's inside. Lang tapped her earpiece. We've got movement. Hargrove's lawyers delayed the PD long enough to reroute him. He's not leaving in cuffs. Vale swore under his breath. He's going for the evidence. He already tried, Ava said. The USB's in the system now. If he touches it, we'll know, Lang finished. But he won't stop there. Ava turned toward the stairwell. Then, neither will I. Vale grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly. You're not operational. Ava met his gaze. I never stopped being. For a split second, the air between them crackled with old arguments, old choices, old blood. Vale released her. Fine, but you don't go alone. Lang was already moving. I'll take the administrative wing. No, Ava said. He'll expect that. Lang paused. Then where Ava's eyes tracked the hospital's silhouette below the darkened windows, the glowing ER, the quiet ICU wing where machines breathed for people who couldn't. He'll hit the backup power junction, Ava said. It's the only place that lets him threaten lives without pulling a trigger. Vale nodded sharply. We split. As they moved, Ava's phone vibrated again. Known contact, you broke the rules. Her pulse spiked. Lang noticed. That him. Or someone above him, Ava said. They descended separate stairwells, the building swallowing the sound of the helipad behind them. Back in the ER, Renee felt the shift before she saw it. Monitors flickered. The lights dimmed, then stabilized. A few patients murmured in confusion. What's happening? Dr. Pierce asked, tension creeping into his voice. Renee didn't answer. She was watching the hallway. Clay Hargrove reappeared at the far end, flanked not by police, but by a man in maintenance coveralls pushing a cart piled high with equipment. Too casual, too calm. Renee's hand went to her radio. Security eyes on Administrator Hargrove. Static answered. Clay met her gaze and smiled thinly. He lifted his phone and pressed a button. In the ICU, alarms began to scream. Ventilators stuttered. Backup lights flared red. Renee's heart dropped. Code red, she shouted. Power, instability, ICU. In the stairwell below, Ava heard the alarms and broke into a run. Whatever this had been before Money Secret's leverage, it was over. Now it was about lives. And Clay Hargrove had just crossed the one line that couldn't be uncrossed. The first thing Ava felt was the air pressure change, an almost imperceptible shift that told her a sealed corridor had just opened somewhere it shouldn't have. The second was the sound alarms stacking over each other. ICU alerts bleeding into cardiac monitors, a chorus of machines protesting instability. She took the stairs 2 at a time, muscles burning, breath controlled. Years ago, she'd learned how panic stole oxygen from the brain. Tonight, she refused to give it the chance. On the 3rd floor, she burst into the service corridor that ran parallel to the ICU. Red emergency lights washed the walls in a harsh glow. A gurney stood abandoned near the corner sheets, half pulled back as if someone had been interrupted mid-task. Maintenance to ICU junction, a voice crackled over a radio somewhere ahead. Calm. Too calm. Ava slowed, listening. Footsteps. 2 sets. 1 heavy, 1 light. She slipped into a shadowed alcove just as a man in coveralls pushed past a tool cart, rattling softly. Behind him walked Clay Hargrove, jacket off now, sleeves rolled up, the mask finally dropped. His face was tight with focus, eyes bright with something close to excitement. You have 90 seconds, the maintenance man said. After that, the generators trip permanently. That's plenty, Clay replied. We only need them scared. They stopped at a steel door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Clay keyed in a code with practiced ease. The lock clicked. Ava felt a familiar cold settle in her gut. He knew this place too well. She waited until they stepped inside, then moved. The room beyond hummed with contained power cables thick as wrists, junction boxes lined like sentries, warning labels peeling from years of neglect. Clay crossed straight to the primary console, fingers flying as he disabled safeguards with surgical precision. ICUs dropping pressure, the maintenance man reported. Ventilators are compensating, but not for long, Clay finished. Good. Ava stepped through the doorway. Step away from the console. Both men spun. The maintenance man's eyes widened. Clay's narrowed. Well, Clay said, recovering quickly. If it isn't our hero. Ava positioned herself between them and the door stance relaxed, hands open. You don't need to do this. Clay laughed. On the contrary, I do. That file of yours, it doesn't just end me. It opens doors you don't want opened. Doors that lead to prison, Ava said. Or to people who don't like being exposed, Clay countered. People who don't go quietly. Behind her, a monitor alarm spiked. 50 seconds, the maintenance man said nervously. Clay gestured with his chin. See, time pressure. You understand that language. Ava's eyes flicked to the man in coveralls. He was sweating now, fear seeping through the bravado. A tool belt hung crooked at his waist, heavy with implements he didn't know how to use in a fight. Walk away, Ava told him. Right now. Clay's smile vanished. Don't listen to her. Ava met the man's gaze. If you flip that last switch, someone on a ventilator dies. That's on you, not him. The man swallowed hard. 30 seconds, he whispered. Clay's voice sharpened. Do it. Ava moved. Not at Clay, at the man. One step. A feint. The maintenance man flinched, instinct screaming. Ava's hand snapped out, twisting his wrist just enough to send the radio skidding across the floor. He cried out, dropping to a knee. Clay lunged for the console. Ava pivoted, driving her shoulder into his chest, knocking him back against the junction box. Sparks flew. The lights flickered. Don't, Clay, shouted, suddenly panicked. Ava slammed her palm down on the emergency override. The hum deepened, stabilized. In the ICU alarms cut off one by one. Clay stared at the console, then at Ava. Rage twisted his features. You think this ends it? No, Ava said quietly. But it ends this. Clay reached inside his jacket. Ava reacted instantly, twisting his arm, sending the gun clattering to the floor. He stumbled, backpedaling, eyes wild now, the control gone. You don't get it, he snarled. People like you, quiet, invisible, you think you can fix the world one good choice at a time. Ava's voice was steady. I think I can stop you. Footsteps thundered in the hall. FBI agent Lang's voice cut through the chaos. Hands where I can see them, Clay froze, chest heaving. Lang burst in with 2 agents, weapons raised but controlled. She took in the scene in a glance, the disabled console, the maintenance man curled on the floor. Clay cornered. Mr. Hargrove, Lang said coolly, you are under arrest for conspiracy, coercion, and attempted manslaughter. Clay laughed weakly. You'll never keep me. Lang smiled thinly. Watch us. They cuffed him as Colonel Vale appeared in the doorway, eyes sweeping the room before settling on Ava. You all right? Ava nodded. ICU's stable. Vale exhaled relief, cracking through his composure. Good work. Downstairs, the ER buzzed with confused energy. Renee moved from bed to bed, checking patients, barking orders, grounding her staff in routine. Dr. Pierce hovered nearby, shaken. Renee, he said quietly, I was wrong about her. Renee didn't look at him. I know. Duke Ram stirred in bay, 3 alarms now silent around him. He blinked, disoriented. Ava entered a moment later, her presence calm as ever. It's over, she told him. Your sister's safe. Duke's breath hitched. How do you? Trust me, Ava said. He did. Outside dawn crept toward the horizon, pale and tentative. Clay Hargrove was led past the nurse's station in cuffs. Conversations died as eyes followed him. He didn't look at Ava. She watched him go, feeling no triumph. Just a quiet certainty that tonight at least the right choice had won. But as Agent Lang approached her, expression serious, Ava knew better than to believe it was finished. There's another name, Lang said softly. Higher up. Ava nodded. I figured. The alarms were silent now. The pressure, however, had only shifted. The hospital didn't celebrate victories. It absorbed them quietly, efficiently, folding chaos back into routine as if nothing extraordinary had happened. By the time dawn's first grey light slipped through the narrow windows, Mercy Harbour Medical Center looked almost normal again. Almost. Ava stood outside Bay 3 watching Duke Ram sleep. His breathing was even now chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The wildness had drained from his face, replaced by exhaustion so deep it bordered on collapse. A man who'd been running on fear for too long had finally run out of road. Renee approached arms, folded voice low. Police took Clay out the back. Less noise that way. Ava nodded. Good. They're saying FBI's taking over, Renee continued. Whole thing's going federal. It already was, Ava replied. Renee studied her. You going to tell me who you really are? Ava didn't answer immediately. She watched Duke's hand twitch in his sleep fingers, curling as if still holding on to something that wasn't there. I'm a nurse, she said finally. Right now, that's enough, Renee huffed softly. You drop a 7-foot man like gravity owes you a favor, and you expect me to buy that. Ava met her eyes a flicker of something human, tired, raw, breaking through the calm. I expect you to let me do my job. Renee held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once. All right, for now. Dr. Pierce hovered a few steps away, uncertainty etched into his posture. He'd replayed the night in his head a dozen times already, every assumption, every moment he'd chosen procedure over instinct. Ava, he said, clearing his throat. I owe you an apology. Ava turned toward him. I misjudged you, Pierce continued. I let hierarchy blind me. If you hadn't acted. But I did, Ava said gently. And everyone's alive. That's what matters. Pierce nodded, chastened. If there's anything I can do, protect your patients, Ava said. Even when it's inconvenient. The words landed. Pierce swallowed and nodded again, deeper this time. In Bay 3, Duke stirred eyes, fluttering open. Confusion crossed his face, followed by panic, then recognition when he saw Ava. You're still here, he rasped. Yes, Ava said, stepping closer. And so are you. He scanned the room. They didn't, they won't, Ava replied. The people who hurt you are in custody. Duke's breath shuddered. My sister, safe, Ava said. Federal protection. You'll see her once they finish the paperwork. The man's face crumpled, relief pouring out of him in a silent, broken exhale. He turned his head away, ashamed of the tears. I almost killed someone, he whispered. You almost didn't, Ava corrected. And you stopped. That wasn't me, Duke said bitterly. That was fear. Ava nodded. Fear makes strong people do dangerous things. It doesn't define them. Duke looked at her, then really looked. What about you? Ava didn't answer. Outside the bay, Agent Tessa Lang waited, posture relaxed but eyes alert. When Ava stepped out, Lang fell into step beside her. You did good tonight, Lang said. Textbook under pressure. I broke cover, Ava replied. Lang shrugged. Cover's only useful if it doesn't get people killed. They walked down the corridor past staff, moving with the brittle exhaustion of survivors. Clay talked, Lang continued. Not much. Enough. About the other name, Ava said. Lang nodded. Someone who doesn't touch money directly, doesn't sign forms, pulls strings through favors and emergency approvals. Inside healthcare, Ava asked. Adjacent, Lang replied. Close enough to hide. They stopped near the elevators. Lang lowered her voice. You weren't the only contingency. Ava's eyes sharpened. Meaning someone else inside this hospital was supposed to make sure Duke didn't walk out alive, Lang said. When that failed, Clay escalated. Ava's jaw tightened. Hu Lang met her gaze. We don't know yet. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open. Get some rest, Lang said. We'll need you. For what? Ava asked. Lang's smile was thin. Closure. The doors closed, leaving Ava alone in the corridor. She stood there for a moment, listening to the building breathe. Then her phone vibrated. Unknown contact, you should have stayed quiet. Ava didn't delete the message this time. She typed back a single word. Try. The reply came instantly. Watch your back. Ava slipped the phone away and turned, scanning the hallway. Nurses moved past. A janitor pushed a cart. Security chatted near the desk. Normal. Too normal. She returned to the ER floor just as Renee was finishing shift change. You heading out? Renee asked. Ava nodded. I'll be back tonight. Renee studied her, then handed her a fresh pair of scrubs. Locker room, shower, You look like hell. Ava almost smiled. In the locker room, steam fogged the mirrors. Ava stripped off her scrubs, muscles finally trembling now that the adrenaline had faded. As hot water hit her shoulders, the night replayed in fragments. Duke's eyes, Clay's sneer, the ICU alarms, and the message. Someone else was still watching. She dressed and stepped back into the hallway just as a commotion rippled near the entrance. 2 men in suits stood by the security desk, badges out. Federal. Between them stood Miles. He looked pale. Ava approached. "What's going on?" One of the men turned. "Nurse Carter, yes. We have a few questions about an unauthorized data trace initiated from your workstation." Ava's pulse steadied. "I documented everything." "We know," the man said. "That's why we're here." Miles looked at Ava, fear flickering in his eyes. "I didn't say anything." Ava met his gaze. "You did fine." The agent nodded toward the exit. "We'll talk somewhere quieter." As they walked, Ava glanced back at the ER one last time. Duke slept. Renee ran the board. Life continued. But beneath it all, the pressure was building again, and next time she wouldn't be the only one in the crosshairs. The conference room they led Ava into was windowless, intentionally bland. Beige walls, a long laminate table, a single flickering fluorescent panel overhead that hummed just loud enough to irritate the nerves. It was the kind of room designed to make people talk, not because it intimidated them, but because it made silence uncomfortable. Miles was asked to wait outside. The door clicked shut behind Ava. The 2 federal agents introduced themselves again, slower this time, as if repetition might rearrange the facts. One of them, Agent Robert Klein, did most of the talking. His partner, Agent Dana Morales, watched quietly, eyes sharp, pen idle in her hand. "You initiated a checksum trace on an external device," Klein said. "That action exposed a network we'd been monitoring for months." Ava folded her hands on the table. "Then you're welcome." Klein smiled thinly. "You violated protocol." "I saved evidence," Ava replied evenly. "There's a difference." Morales finally spoke. "You also forced our timeline." Ava met her gaze. "Someone forced mine first." Klein exhaled. "You're aware this puts you back on the radar." "I never left it," Ava said. A beat passed. Morales leaned forward. "The other name, Clay, hinted at. We think they're already inside this building." Ava didn't flinch. "I know." Klein raised an eyebrow. "How? Because Clay wasn't improvising," Ava said. "He was executing a contingency. Someone else disabled cameras. Someone else rerouted PD. Someone else thought I'd be isolated." Morales nodded slowly. "Which means they're still here." Ava finished. Silence stretched. Klein closed his folder. "We're placing Mercy Harbor under discreet federal observation. No announcements, no badges in the hallways." "That won't stop them," Ava said. "No," Morales agreed. "But it might make them move." Klein stood. "You're not under arrest. Not yet." Ava stood as well. "I'm not running." "Good," Morales said. "Because neither are they." When Ava stepped back into the hallway, the hospital felt different. Not louder, not quieter, sharper, as if every corner now held intent. Miles looked up from his chair. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Ava said. "But you need to listen to me." He nodded immediately. "If anyone asks you about last night, anyone, you tell them you followed orders and you don't speculate," Ava continued. "You don't connect dots. You don't try to be brave." Miles swallowed. "What about you?" Ava paused. "I'll handle me." They parted ways near the nurse's station. Renee caught Ava's eye, a silent question passing between them. Later, Ava changed back into her scrubs and returned to the floor. That was the mistake. The hospital had adjusted its rhythm, but the people inside it hadn't. Fear moved differently than exhaustion. It hid in smiles, in over-helpful gestures, in glances that lingered half a second too long. Ava felt it near supply. She was restocking trauma carts when she noticed the door to the medication storage room ajar. It should have been sealed, logged, restricted. She closed it gently, pretending not to notice the man at the end of the hall, watching her reflection in the stainless steel cabinet. He looked like staff. Mid-40s, calm face, ID clipped properly. Too properly. Ava pushed the cart forward, turning the corner, and the lights went out. Not fully. Emergency reds flared instantly, bathing the hallway in blood-colored shadow. Ava stopped. Footsteps approached from behind, unhurried. "Miss Carter," a voice said pleasantly. "You've caused quite a bit of inconvenience." Ava turned slowly. The man smiled. "Name's Thomas Reed. I handle compliance." "Funny," Ava said. "You don't show up on the compliance roster." Reed chuckled. "That's because I don't exist on paper." He gestured subtly. 2 more figures emerged from side corridors blocking exits. "We don't want trouble," Reed said. "Just the drive." "It's already gone federal," Ava replied. "You're late." Reed's smile thinned. "Then we'll settle for you." Ava felt the shift, the moment when words were no longer currency. She dropped the cart. Metal clanged. Reed flinched. Ava moved. She took down the first man with a sharp elbow to the jaw, spinning into a kick that sent the second stumbling into the wall. Reed lunged faster than she expected, grabbing her arm and twisting. Pain flared. Ava used it, rolling with the motion, stepping inside his reach, driving her knee up hard. Reed gasped, staggering back. Before he could recover, the emergency lights snapped to white. Federal agents, a voice shouted. "Hands up!" Reed froze. Lang and 2 agents flooded the hallway, weapons trained but steady. Reed's smile returned brittle and false as he raised his hands. "Well," he said lightly, "that was inconvenient." They cuffed him quickly. As they did, Reed leaned closer to Ava. "This doesn't end with me." Ava leaned in just as close. "I know." They dragged him away, but Ava's pulse didn't slow, because Reed hadn't been afraid. Later that morning, Lang found Ava on the helipad, staring out over the city as daylight finally claimed the night. "You flushed him out," Lang said. "That was the idea. He wanted me," Ava replied. "Not the evidence." Lang nodded. "Which means your leverage." Ava's jaw set. "Then use me." Lang studied her. "That's a dangerous offer." "I live dangerously," Ava said flatly. Below them, an ambulance pulled in. "Another life. Another crisis." Lang sighed. "We'll need bait." Ava didn't hesitate. "I'll stay on shift." Lang shook her head. "You won't last." Ava looked back at the hospital. "They won't let me leave." Lang smiled grimly. "You really are a nurse." Ava's phone vibrated once more. "Unknown contact, one more try." Ava typed back without looking. "Make it count." She slipped the phone away and headed for the stairwell, the weight of unseen eyes pressing in around her. The game wasn't over. It had just entered its most dangerous phase. By the time the second helicopter arrived, Mercy Harbor Medical Center no longer felt like a hospital. It felt like contested ground. The morning shift had begun filtering in fresh scrubs, travel mugs, tired jokes, only to be met with locked access points. Quiet federal agents, standing where volunteers usually greeted families, and a tension in the air that refused to explain itself. No announcements were made, no alarms sounded, but everyone felt it. Ava stood near the ambulance bay, charting with deliberate calm, every sense tuned outward. She could feel eyes on her even when she couldn't see them, reflections in glass, footsteps that paused when she paused, conversations that ended a beat too quickly. Leverage, Lang had said. Ava had agreed to be it. The sound came first, low, distant, unmistakable. Rotor blades. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. A paramedic stepped out of the bay doors and looked up. "That's not medevac," he murmured. The helicopter descended with controlled authority, wind whipping loose papers and tugging at coats. Its paint was darker than the earlier one, heavier, built for endurance, not speed. When it touched down, the force of it seemed to press the entire building into stillness. The rotors slowed. The doors opened. 4 people stepped out. They moved with the quiet confidence of those used to entering dangerous places unannounced. 2 wore plain tactical jackets. 1 wore a dark suit that didn't belong on a helipad. The last man, tall, broad-shouldered silver at the temples, walked last, eyes already scanning. He didn't ask for directions. He walked straight toward the entrance. Inside, Renee felt it like a pressure drop. "Who the hell is that?" she muttered. Dr. Pierce stared through the glass. "That's not hospital administration." The doors slid open. The man in front stopped just inside the threshold and spoke not loudly but with a voice that carried. "I'm looking for Ava Carter." Every head turned. Ava didn't move at first. Lang stepped forward from the periphery. "General Hale," she said. "Wasn't expecting you." General William Hale nodded once, acknowledging her without breaking stride. "Plans change." His gaze finally found Ava. For a moment the ER ceased to exist. Hale crossed the floor and stopped an arm's length from her. He looked her over, not her scrubs, not her badge, but her eyes, the way she stood, the way she breathed. Then he said the words that shattered what remained of her anonymity. "Still standing, Lieutenant." The room froze. Dr. Pierce's mouth fell open. Renee went utterly still. A nurse dropped a pen, the sound too loud in the silence. Ava met Hale's gaze evenly. "You weren't supposed to come." Hale's lips pressed into a thin line. "Someone threatened federal witnesses inside a civilian hospital." "Someone wanted me visible," Ava replied. "Yes," Hale said. "And now you are." The man in the suit stepped forward. Deputy Director Ross, Joint Task Oversight. "Miss Carter," Ava Hale corrected sharply. Ross blinked, then nodded. "Ava, we have confirmation that Thomas Reed was not acting alone. He was a firewall." "Between who and who?" Ava asked. Ross hesitated. Hale answered. "Between hospital operations and a private logistics contractor with military ties." A ripple went through the room. Renee found her voice. "You're telling me this place was being used as cover?" "Yes," Hale said. "And someone here helped." Ava's eyes swept the ER. Staff looked back in shock, fear, confusion. "Not most of them," Ava said. "Just one more." Lang stepped closer. "We've narrowed it down." Ava exhaled slowly. "Then let's finish it." They moved quickly, quietly down a service corridor toward the administrative wing. Cameras were live now, feeds watched by people who knew what to look for. The suspect panicked. That was the mistake. A code was triggered from inside the hospital network. Doors locked. Elevators froze between floors. Somewhere a patient cried out as a monitor alarmed. "Diversion," Hale said. "They're trying to pull us away." Ava stopped at an intersection and closed her eyes for half a second. "Not away," she said. "Down." They took the stairs. The basement smelled of coolant and old concrete. Pipes ran overhead like exposed veins. At the far end, a door stood ajar, light spilling out. Inside, a woman stood at a console, late 30s surgical cap still on her head. Dr. Elaine Porter, anesthesiology. She turned when they entered. For a moment no one spoke. Then Porter laughed, short, bitter. "I wondered how long it would take." Lang raised her weapon. "Hands where I can see them." Porter complied slowly. "You know what the irony is," she said, eyes fixed on Ava. "I kept people alive, long enough to be useful." Ava felt something cold settle in her chest. "You poisoned them with dependency." "I dosed them," Porter snapped. "For contracts, for supply chains, for wars you never see." Hale's voice was steel. "You used a hospital." Porter's smile faltered. "So did you." Before anyone could move, Porter slammed her palm down. The room went dark. Emergency lights failed. A beat of blackness. Then Ava moved. She reached Porter in the dark muscle memory, guiding her hands, finding wrists twisting, forcing the woman down before panic could spread. The lights flickered back on. Porter lay restrained on the floor, breathing hard. "It's done," Ava said. Agents moved in cuffs, snapping closed. The building seemed to exhale. Upstairs, power stabilized. Alarms fell silent. General Hale looked at Ava, something like pride cutting through the severity. "You never lost your edge." Ava shook her head. "I never wanted it back." Hale studied her. "You saved lives tonight. Again." She looked around at the hospital, at Renee, coordinating staff at Pierce, checking on patients at Duke, sleeping somewhere above free at last. "I'm exactly where I belong," Ava said. Hale nodded once. "Then we won't pull you out." Ava's phone vibrated in her pocket. No message this time, just silence. The kind that comes after a storm finally breaks. The silence after Dr. Elaine Porter's arrest felt heavier than the alarms that had come before it. In the basement control room, agents moved with practiced efficiency, photographing screens, bagging drives, cataloging evidence. Porter sat cuffed against the wall, shoulders slumped, now the defiance drained from her eyes. Whatever cause she'd convinced herself she served had collapsed under fluorescent lights and federal badges. Ava watched from the doorway, arms loose at her sides, breathing finally slowing to something like normal. General Hale stepped up beside her. "You recognized her faster than the rest." Ava nodded. She masked it well. compassion is a good disguise. Hale studied her profile. You could have exposed her earlier. Yes, Ava said, but I needed proof that couldn't be buried. Hale accepted that. He always had, even when he didn't like it. Upstairs, Mercy Harbor was reassembling itself again. Elevators hummed back to life. Doors unlocked. The quiet lockdown lifted without fanfare, as if the hospital were ashamed to admit how close it had come to catastrophe. Renee found Ava near the nurses' station. They're saying it's over, Renee said, not quite trusting the words. That true as it gets, Ava replied. Renee exhaled. Good, because I just got 3 ambulances inbound and 1 very angry cardiologist demanding answers. Ava almost smiled. Then we should get back to work. Renee paused, studying her. Lieutenant, nurse, whatever you are. Ava met her gaze. Right now I'm on shift. Renee nodded once. Then get to it. That was the closest thing to respect Renee ever offered. In bay, 3 Duke Ram was awake again. This time his eyes were clear. Ava stepped inside, closing the curtain behind her. Duke pushed himself upright with effort, wincing as sore muscles protested. They told me it's done, he said. All of it. It is, Ava confirmed. You're free to go once they finish statements. Duke swallowed. I don't know how to say thank you. Ava pulled up a stool and sat. You don't have to. He shook his head. I hurt people. You were pushed, Ava said, and you stopped when you could. Duke looked down at his hands. I thought strength meant never breaking. Ava's voice softened. It means knowing when to let go. There was a knock at the curtain. Agent Lang stepped in posture, relaxed for the first time since she'd arrived. Your sister's on her way to a safe house, she said to Duke. You'll be reunited soon. Duke's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. Lang turned to Ava. We'll need your formal statement later. Ava nodded. I'll give it. Lang hesitated. You could come with us, you know. Protective detail. A desk. Quiet. Ava glanced around the ER at the organized chaos, the beeping monitors, the people who needed hands more than secrets. I'm done hiding, Ava said. But I'm not done here. Lang smiled faintly. Figured you'd say that. As the morning wore on, word spread, not the truth, not the full story, but enough. Staff whispered. Patients asked questions. Someone had filmed the helicopter landing from the parking lot, and the clip was already circulating online, stripped of context, heavy with speculation. By noon, hospital administration issued a carefully worded statement about external interference and swift interagency cooperation. No names were mentioned. But people noticed the difference. They noticed how Ava moved through the ER now, still quiet, still precise, but no longer invisible. Eyes followed her with something new, respect, curiosity, a hint of awe. Doctor. Pierce caught up with her near radiology. I spoke to the board, he said. They wanted to put you on leave. And Ava asked, and I told them they'd have to put me on leave first, Pierce replied, because I signed off on your actions. Ava stopped walking. You didn't have to do that. Pierce shrugged, uncomfortable. I should have trusted you sooner. Ava held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. Thank you. The afternoon passed without incident, which Ava knew was its own kind of miracle. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the ER windows, General Hale returned alone this time. You sure you won't reconsider, he asked, quietly standing beside her at the nurse's station. You've earned a quieter life. Ava looked at the patient board. Trauma, cardiac, pediatrics, lives intersecting in fragile lines. I tried quiet, she said. It wasn't honest. Hale smiled sadly. You always were stubborn, and you always needed someone to say no, Ava replied. Hale chuckled. Fair. He straightened, expression serious again. We'll keep an eye on things. You won't be alone. Ava met his gaze. I never was. He nodded once, then turned and walked away, his presence already fading back into rumor and shadow. That night, as Ava finished her shift, Renee stopped her near the exit. Tomorrow, Renee said, I'm putting you on trauma-led rotation. Ava blinked. That's not a question, Renee finished. You earned it. Ava felt something warm spread through her chest, not pride, not triumph, but a sense of rightness. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. Sirens wailed in the distance. Somewhere, a helicopter lifted off, heading toward another crisis. Ava stepped into the cool evening air scrubs, rustling softly, and felt the weight of the last 24 hours finally settle. She had been underestimated. She had been targeted. And she had chosen again to stand her ground. Inside Mercy Harbor, the ER lights glowed steady and bright, ready for the next emergency, the next test of nerve and compassion. Ava Carter turned back toward the doors. Her shift wasn't over yet. The call came at 9:47 p.m., just as the ER settled into its uneasy night rhythm again. Trauma, inbound, the dispatcher's voice crackled over the speakers. Multi-vehicle collision on Harbor Freeway. Too critical. ETA 4 minutes. Ava was already moving. She washed her hands, snapped on gloves, and scanned the board. Renee had paired her with a seasoned trauma nurse and a respiratory therapist she trusted. The team flowed around her without question now, no raised eyebrows, no second guessing. Just motion clean and deliberate. As the ambulance sirens drew closer, Ava felt it again. That subtle tightening in her chest. Instinct. She pushed it aside. Not everything was a threat. Not every night was a battlefield. The first gurney burst through the doors, young male chest trauma, unstable vitals. Ava took the lead voice, steady eyes, sharp. She called for blood-ordered imaging, directed compressions when the patient flatlined for 3 terrifying seconds before surging back. They stabilized him. The second patient followed an older woman, head injury, breathing shallow. Ava caught the faint wheeze, adjusted the airway before it worsened, and felt the team respond instantly. For a moment, it was just medicine again. Just lives. Then Frank Dorsey appeared at the edge of her vision, face pale beneath the harsh lights. He waited until the patients were wheeled out, then leaned close. "Someone's asking for you," he said quietly. Didn't give a name. Wouldn't show ID. Says it's personal. Ava didn't look up from her chart. "Where family consult room B." Ava closed the chart and handed it off. "Cover me." Renee met her eyes. 5 minutes. Family consult room B sat just off the main corridor, private, enclosed, the kind of place where bad news was delivered gently. Ava pushed the door open and stopped. The room was empty. The lights were off. She didn't step inside. Ava reached for the switch, and the door slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked. The lights came on. A man sat in the chair, opposite the table, legs crossed, hands folded neatly. He wore a suit that fit too well and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Hello, Ava," he said. "We've been meaning to meet." Ava remained standing. "You're trespassing," he chuckled softly. "Technically, I'm a donor." Her eyes flicked to the corner, no cameras. Soundproofing panels. This room was designed to keep grief contained. Or secrets. "You lost," Ava said. "Everyone you had is in custody." The man shook his head. "Not everyone." He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, a live video feed. Duke Ram, handcuffed, seated in the back of a transport van. The feed timestamp ticked forward. Ava's pulse spiked. That transport was federal. Contracted, the man corrected. Outsourcing saves money. The van swerved suddenly on screen. A masked figure appeared in the frame. Ava's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "What do you want?" The man leaned back. "You." Ava didn't respond. "I don't need you to come with me," he continued. "I need you to stop." "Stop. What pulling threads?" he said pleasantly. "Clay, Porter, Reed, all useful idiots. You, on the other hand, are a liability." Ava's jaw tightened. "If you hurt him, I won't," the man said. "As long as you do exactly what I ask." He slid another file onto the tablet. Hospital schematics, highlighted routes, timed checkpoints. "Walk out of this room," he said. "Return to your shift. Pretend this ends tonight. And if I don't..." The man tapped the screen. The masked figure in the van raised a weapon. Ava closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, her expression was unreadable. "You won't get away with this." The man smiled. "I already have. For years." Ava took the tablet and set it face down on the table. "Release him." After the man replied, "Compliance first." The door clicked open behind her. Frank stood there confused. "Everything okay?" Ava turned toward him, face composed. "Yes." She walked past him without another word. Back in the corridor, the hospital noise washed over her monitor's voices, footsteps. Life continuing, unaware of the blade now pressed against it. Agent Lang appeared from the stairwell, eyes narrowing as she took in Ava's face. What happened? Ava shook her head once. They have Duke. Lang stiffened. Who? The one we missed, Ava said. The reason Clay thought he was untouchable. Lang's jaw set. We can mobilize. Not in time, Ava said. They're testing me. Lang searched her eyes. What are you going to do? Ava looked back toward the ER, toward the people who trusted her with their worst moments. Toward Renee, who was already glancing their way. I'm going to finish this, Ava said. Lang grabbed her arm. Alone, Ava met her gaze. The way they expect. Lang hesitated, then released her. You call if you get a window. Ava nodded. She returned to the nurse's station, picked up a fresh trauma pager, and clipped it on as if nothing had changed. But inside, the weight was crushing. She was being watched, timed, measured, and somewhere on a dark road, a frightened man waited for her to make the wrong choice. Ava took a breath and stepped back into the flow of the ER. The clock above the station ticked forward. Whatever happened next would decide everything. Ava counted the seconds by the rhythm of the monitors. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound anchored her to the present while everything else threatened to spiral. The man in the suit, whoever he truly was, had designed the situation carefully. No rushing out of the hospital. No dramatic exits. No obvious signals. He wanted her to choose silence. Ava had never been good at that. She moved through the ER as if nothing were wrong, hands steady, voice calm. She sutured a laceration, reassured a panicked father, adjusted a drip. Every action bought her time, and time she knew was the only weapon he'd underestimated. At 10:11 p.m., she created her window. Renee, Ava said, casually glancing at the board. I'm grabbing meds from pharmacy for Bay 6. Renee nodded without looking up. Don't get stuck in there. Night's already ugly. Ava headed down the corridor but turned into the stairwell instead. She took the steps, 2 at a time, emerging into the ambulance bay where a transport crew was prepping a rig. She crossed to the far wall, slipped behind a supply cage, and pulled out her phone. One call. Agent Lang answered on the first ring. I have 40 seconds, Ava said. Transport van. Black. Route 17 spur toward the docks. He's alive. Lang didn't waste breath. How? Because they want me quiet, Ava replied. They won't kill leverage until it stops moving. Understood, Lang said. Go back. Don't spook them. Ava hung up and slid the phone away just as footsteps approached. The man in the suit emerged from the shadows, expression pleasant. I was beginning to worry. Ava met his gaze. I needed air. Of course, he said. Hospitals can feel suffocating. They walked back inside together, his presence a silent leash. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. Back in the ER, Duke's name appeared briefly on a status board, then vanished. The man smiled. Good girl. Ava said nothing. At 10:23 p.m., the power flickered. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to ripple across the building. The man frowned. At 10:24, sirens sounded outside, not approaching the hospital but passing it fast. At 10:25, Ava's trauma pager vibrated. Code Silver. The man's smile faltered. What did you do, Ava? Turned to face him fully for the first time. Her voice was quiet. I stopped being quiet. The ER doors burst open. Federal agents flooded in with controlled speed, weapons low but ready. At their center, Agent Lang moved like a blade finally drawn. Hands up, Lang ordered. Now. The man backed away, disbelief cracking his composure. You can't. This place, this system, you hid behind it, Lang said. You don't own it. He lunged not at Lang but at Ava. He never reached her. Ava stepped inside his movement, redirected his momentum and sent him crashing to the floor in a clean, efficient takedown. The same stillness followed as it had hours earlier, the same collective intake of breath. Cuffs snapped closed. Outside, on a distant road near the docks, a transport van screeched to a halt under flashing lights. Duke Ram was pulled free, shaken but alive as federal agents swarmed the scene. Back in the ER, Renee stared at Ava as if seeing her for the first time. You okay? Renee asked. Ava nodded. Yes. Dr. Pierce exhaled shakily. Remind me never to underestimate you again. Ava almost smiled. The man was led away, still protesting, still insisting on influence and immunity. No one listened. Not anymore. As the night settled, the hospital breathed again, steadier this time. The danger had passed. The threads had been pulled and the web had finally collapsed. Near dawn, Ava stood at the entrance, watching the first pale light edge over the horizon. Lang joined her. "You could have walked away." Ava nodded. "I thought about it. But you didn't." Ava looked back at the ER, at the stretchers, the lights, the quiet courage stitched into every corner. This is where people need someone to stand when everything else is falling apart. Lang extended a hand. Ava shook it. Inside, Duke waited with his sister, both wrapped in blankets, both alive. Justice hadn't been loud. It hadn't been easy. But it had been exact. And sometimes that was enough. It's easy to mistake silence for weakness, to assume that the quiet ones are untested, unprepared, or unimportant. But real strength doesn't announce itself. It watches, it waits, and when the moment comes, it acts with purpose. In places like hospitals, where lives hang in the balance every second, courage doesn't always wear a uniform or demand authority. Sometimes it wears scrubs. Sometimes it stands still while chaos moves around it. And sometimes it chooses to protect others even when the cost is personal. Justice isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with applause or headlines. Often it arrives in the form of one right decision made under unbearable pressure. If this story moved you, share where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. And don't forget to subscribe, because the quiet heroes among us deserve to be seen.